catching up this week with the part 2 of the Nate Clark interview. Jumping in on Y2K in the second part of the knife making century. We were Y2K, right? All right.
Yeah, Y2K. Y2K. And what can I say? While everyone was freaking out, I was grinding away.
There we go.
Nice. Yeah, I was like a wee child, but I don't really remember. Apparently, people were just losing their shit.
Everyone thought the world was going to end.
They were.
Yeah.
I was worried, but I was going to build some knives. That's all I knew. And as long as the power was on. So, I mean, I really was grinding away in Y2K. Just, self-employed, trying to keep my apprentice busy, training him up. And he didn't have quite as much drive as I did. Didn't have as much, responsibility and so all that, so to speak. So, but between him and I, we built 61 custom knives that year. I worked 1,700 hours and made $30,000. And I knew at that point, I made that right decision when I graduated high school, because here I am being successful. In 2001, my dad was an incredible artist. He could draw. I remember as a kid being, "Dad, draw me a picture of two guys fighting with spears." And he'd sit down and just start drawing
spears.
Yeah. Oh, I had this thing for spears. I don't know. I was just like, I was a little caveman kid. And he would sit down, and 15 minutes later, he would have this, incredible drawing, muscle definition, facial expressions. He had a book collection of a lot of Conan the Barbarian type stuff, Isaac Asimov, and the cover art of all these books was something that, I really just poured over. I read a lot of books as a kid, a lot of fantasy stuff, Forgotten Realms and Dragonlance, just totally into that. And so in 2001, he had expressed interest in learning how to engrave. He had come to a few knife shows, met Jerry Whitmore, who was a local engraver, lived in Rice Valley, Oregon, which was pretty much right across the valley from Red Hill, Oregon, where the Ballotons were. Was at the knife show every year with his engraving stuff. And I picked up an old ball vise, an engraver from Jerry Whitmore, and gave it to my dad. And we collaborated on the first knife together, my dad and I, and he engraved a knife that had a dragon on either side, kind of a sunburst design behind the dragon's head, and we sold that knife at the Eugene Knife Show, Oregon Knife Collectors Association show, for $1,600. And it was stainless steel. It was one of my MFK designs, stainless steel blades, stainless steel handles with his engraving on it. And that show, I had my own table that show. I was actually, it was like Valentin table and me. I sold $10,000 worth of knives in that weekend alone.
So successful immediately. That's good.
And it was one of those. That was probably quite possibly the highlight of my career for quite a long time. It was. I'm still proud. I remember that weekend, and it was exhilarating to do that. And it was something that I had started prepping for probably 45 days prior to the show. Created this is what I'm going to make, and started cutting parts and started working away at it, on top of, finishing and selling a few pieces each week to, pay the bills and whatnot. And, just put together a good display of knives for that show, and I think I sold every single one. So it was very gratifying. And of course, selling the first knife with my dad, I think I paid him $800 for his work out of that knife, and it was a cool thing. So in 2001, I built 72 custom knives, worked 1,800 hours, made $44,500, and I was doing good, doing great.
Yeah. I had talked to Diskin about the fellow you had mentioned, who I'm now forgetting his name, but who wrote those articles in Tactical Life.
Chuck Carwan.
Yes, Chuck.
Yeah.
And I was talking to him about that, and I need to get him back on to speak about that. But I remember that being the way he was saying it was that he was kind of like a tastemaker of the time. Like if you were anybody who was anybody, like if you were lucky enough, you would have an article in Tactical Knife with him about your autos, and there weren't that many at the time who he would feature. So I remember him mentioning how important that was and how much of a critical turning point that could be.
12 articles a year, so it's 12 lucky people. And he was, Oregon based. He lived out on the Umpqua River out by Tyee area, and beautiful area. Rainey ended up buying a house out that way, and one of my favorite places to go fishing on the Umpqua is the Tyee area. And Chuck Carwan was a writer. He was a gun enthusiast, knife enthusiast. Probably had his hands in all kinds of things I didn't know about. As being a young kid, and rubbing elbows with him a couple times a year at the Valleyton shop. Which during this point, after stepping away from Rainey, I still visited the shop. I used their surface grinder for many years until I developed my own process for surface grinding my material down to the proper thickness and such. So I was involved and still friendly and visiting, and I'd show up and use their surface grinder and clean their grinding room on my way out, and just kind of still trying to show that respect and appreciation. And they're like, you bring your own belts, and you come in after hours, and no problem, dude, like do your thing. And
that's legit. So
pretty much made not on either side. It was just I'd made my decision, and they were happy to see me successful. Why year 2000, year 2001, I really felt I was feeling the success of making that decision to move out on my own and go my own way. Still running in the same circles as the Valletins, shared customers, people that I had met through them, new players in the field. I was kind of a spinoff of the Valletins, so of course they were, looking at my knives as good investment product. And in 2002, I was still working out of Rice Valley, where I was renting that shop with a loft above. I had done several more engraved knives with my dad, added several more new designs to my repertoire, was keeping my apprentice Vincent Moore busy. Probably 2002, probably one of the most, in retrospect, probably one of the most important factors, things that happened was I traded a knife for a gun bluing kit, like a big tanks, propane burners, gun bluing, like you can do full rifles and such in it. But up to that point, I was if I'd used Damascus, it was like etch it and nitro blue or cold steel blue it to bring out the contrast. Or if it was like a high carbon mix. It was just a nitro blue, which is kind of like a rub on chemical reaction to the surface kind of thing to bring out the contrast and the colors between the steel. But gun bluing is a whole different level.
I used to be fascinated in that when I first got into like starting to design and like produce knife stuff. Like for some reason I was like infatuated with bluing. I don't know.
It's
Can you describe the process? Like,
so gun bluing is heat and salts. So what you're doing is, in essence, you are rusting your material in a controlled environment. But it actually creates a protective surface. So when you say gun bluing, it's like if you buy a pistol or a rifle that has a black blued finish, it's gun blued. Whereas like nitro bluing was more of a thin, very, very top surface. And over time of just handling your knife that's nitro blued, it can rub away and sort of disappear in the high contact points. Gun bluing is much deeper. It goes much deeper into the steel, and you get a different look. And I remember the first time I saw a gun blue knife, I'm pretty sure it was on J.A. Harkin's table at the Eugene Knife Show, and I'm like, how is he getting that steel so incredibly black and with that nickel contrast, that bright nickel contrast? And I remember asking him, and he said, I'll never tell you. And okay, that's a challenge. All right. So I figured it out that it was gun bluing, and I did my own research into gun bluing, and it was really a trial and error process in the beginning. Gun bluing calls for, if I remember correctly, I've been kind of out of the game for a few years, but heating up your bluing salts to 294 degrees and you get the black. Well, I had seen many other makers, they got the black contrast. And then I started, the more I looked into it, I'm like, well, what, this guy's getting blues and purples in his, like, how is he doing that? So I started playing with the variances and found out that, well, if you lower your temperatures a little bit, like maybe instead of 294, you're dropping down to 275 or 280, you're getting a different colors coming out, much like anodizing titanium and having a variac to change your electrical currents to get your different colors. So trial and error, I just started practicing. And one thing I learned, you don't want to use the big rifle barrel tanks, which are about 3.5 feet long, because a bucket of gun blue salts at that time was $150. Plus it was a caustic material, so you had to pay about $40 for shipping, and used about a quarter of the bucket per round, and you could reuse that round 3-4 times, and it was pretty expensive. So I streamlined the process. Of course, I'm making folders, so I'm thinking all I need is a container that's like, 6 inches by a foot, and I'm going to use a lot less of these materials. And then next thing I'm like, well, what is this bluing salts made out of? Let's look into that. And then I started buying 2 different ingredients off of eBay and mixing them together and making my own bluing salts. And because I'm buying 2 separate products that aren't mixed together, they're not caustic by themselves, I'm not paying shipping. It ended up being 1/10 the cost, and reducing the size of the bucket. I dialed that process in real nice. So 2002 was the year I learned how to gun blue Damascus. I used a lot more Damascus, a lot more high-end handle materials, fossilized ivories, pre-band ivories, pearls, abalone, and started moving into like this higher end art knife category. where my average knife price went from the $300 to $600 range to the $600 to $1,000 range.
Stepping it up.
And stepping it up. Yep. Basically, you know, trying to climb the ladder in the knife making world, so to speak, and emulate some of the art knives that I admired, you know, from other makers, and find my way along. You know, I was to the point where I'd been taught the basics and what and how to do in the process, but I was trying to find my own niche. You know, obviously at the same time trying to make more money and, you know, move into, you know, hopefully in the direction of, you know, I the range of being able to build knives that were worth more than $1,000, and you know, trying to figure out how these guys out there were making knives that they were selling for $5,000.
That's the trick.
Obviously, that's the trick. Yes, that's the trick. Because, well, then I can go from making 10 knives a month to making 2 knives a month and be making twice as much money. That's the trick. So 2002 was an exciting year in that aspect, but it was also a pretty sad year because in April, my dad passed away of a heart attack. The day after the knife show in Eugene, actually. And so my life kind of changed. Knife making wasn't a focus for a while. Although I was still doing it, that was my living, but you know, my heart wasn't in it.
But your dad did get to see all of the high points and be part of it.
He did.
Which is
he really he really did. And that was very that was the takeaway, was he was able to see his offspring be successful and happy, and quite honestly do something that he had, you know, my father had aspired to be self-employed his entire life, but never really quite got there actually until the very end. He did end up starting a business, creating a rural garbage collection route around Veneta, Oregon, which is the outskirts of Eugene, in a place where there was nobody doing a garbage collection route, and that was in Lane County, which Lane County charged you an arm and a leg at the dump to drop your stuff off. So he, from the ground up, started a route with 10 customers and worked it up to, I think he ended up having 160 customers. And in the end, he ended up selling that business and that route to Sanipack, which is now the big garbage collection company of Lane County, and basically retired off of that sale. And that's kind of when he began having the time to engrave and do some stuff with me, and he was developing his property and putting in a new house and different things like that. So, you know, he got to kind of capitalize on his dream towards the end, but and then, you know, see the success that I was having, and you know, it was very satisfying in that. But, you know, obviously I wish that, you know, he was still around, and that we were still building knives together. That would be ultimately my goal, was for us to have a shop together and be building knives together, or me building knives and him engraving wherever he wanted to fit into that scenario. But so I am thankful for at least having that experience of doing some stuff with him. And those knives that we worked on together are quite rare. We didn't do a lot of them, but they're out there and they're interesting for sure. I think there might be a couple on Arizona Custom Knives that got put there for consignment, and somewhere I've got pictures of all of them. But probably mid 2002, I mean, somewhat because of my father's passing, somewhat because the business I received off that article written by Chuck Carwan, which really put me in orders for almost 2 years, was kind of petering out. My knife sales were kind of dropping off a bit. My advertising was minimal. And so I kind of had a transition in my business where I was doing less custom retail orders, and I started reaching out to knife purveyors and dealers, consigning more knives on websites. Talked about Arizona Custom Knives. Jay and Karen Sato were the original owners of that business, and I was doing more business with them consignment wise, just building a spec knife and sending it out to them to photograph and put away in their safe and put up on their site. I made contact with a fella named Marty Miller, did a lot of business with him. Rob Blanton, did business with him. But ultimately in 2002, I built 51 knives, only worked about 1,500 hours, still managed to pull in 29,000. So still all in all a successful year, but definitely a drop off from the 2 previous years. But life events happening, still did pretty well.
Yeah, life tends to happen when knives are being made.
It does.
Way.
Yep. So that brings us to 2003, which I've dubbed the year of the knife dealers.
Oh boy.
Dan Feldstein, Marty Miller, Rob Blanton, Don Guild, Arizona Custom Knives, at this time now purchased by Julie Hyman. Chet Cantor, James Owens. These were all guys that basically kept me going, kept my knife shop doors open, buying my knives, and kept me working as a knife maker, where I think I may have made a different choice and gone a different route had that not been the case. So, and I did end up receiving a little bit of inheritance at the end of that year. My mom had sold the property and hooked me up, and I kind of retired for a bit, took a mental break. But I still built 66 knives in 2003, worked quite a bit less with about 1,300 hours and made $29,000. So still a self-employed full-time knife maker. In 2004, I moved my shop into my home in Yoncalla. My first home purchase, bought a fixer-upper, was going to be a house flipper in addition to being a knife maker. At this point, I was using Damascus and ivories and pearls all the time. My first apprentice, Vincent Moore, moved on as I'd kind of moved out of his old man's place, renting that shop. He took a Y on the road, going another way. And I met my second apprentice, Darren Russell, who happened to be my neighbor in Yoncalla at the time. Another highlight in my career in 2004 was I made my first knives with Jerry Rados Damascus.
Oh, there we go.
I had always admired Jerry Rados Damascus. It was unique. It was sought after. And at that point, I had made the decision to reach out to him and see what I was going to take to get some steel out of him.
Nice. Which, to be fair, right, so, and a little bit of background there, but some of this stuff used to be a lot harder to get, which we mentioned when talking to people. It wasn't always just, bring up the website, order it, that's it. There was a little bit of extra legwork involved.
I think at that time with Jerry, there was probably a pretty good demand, and he was building his own stuff with his own steel. And I think it was kind of like you had to be somebody for him to hook you up.
Right. Yep.
So, and the interesting stuff about Jerry Rados, unlike anybody else's steel that I had come across, like I used a lot of Devin Thomas and Chad Nichols. Jerry Rados would be, okay, you want some steel from me, send me a template. And he forged his steel to shape. So the pattern of the Damascus didn't disappear off the edges of your blade. It followed in on the edges to the tip, which was, as far as I was concerned at the time, was unique.
It's pretty insane. I don't really know anyone else that does that even to this day.
Yes.
Yeah.
Neither do I. So,
that's like some different stuff.
it definitely is. And I did it justice as best as I, could. I built some beautiful knives out of his steel. Probably in August of 2004, my production ramped up a little bit. I started getting back into it a bit. Probably ran out of inheritance money. Let's see, some other highlights in 2004 is I ended up selling that investment house that I had, and was kind of kicking around looking for a place to put my knife shop, and it just so happened that my apprentice, his place had an old hay barn on it, so we converted that into a knife shop. And I think it was December 15th of 2004 that knife shop was all set up and ready to go, and it was at my apprentice's house, so of course I had somebody right there ready and willing to work whenever I wanted to show up. So in the end, it wasn't a bad year, but still, I made 57 knives, worked about 1,575 hours, and took home $20,000 from the knife business. So a bit of a dip, but it was one of those years where life kicked me down, and I had to roll with the punches.
Yeah.
It certainly was. It was a transitional, but in 2005, of course, I had an apprentice, and this guy was a go-getter. He was a fast learner. It was at a point in his life where he was really looking for something to do too, and like me, he was enthralled with the knives. And and the other thing about him is he had a keen mind, and he has a way of pushing my limits, getting me to come out of my comfort zone. And at the same time, I was using, like I got into that Jerry Rados steel, and kind of challenging myself to move into this higher art knife market. That was the year, in February, I made a landmark knife, which I dubbed Mother Turkish, which was an MFK design with custom forged Jerry Rados Damascus. And it was, rather than the traditional bolster and handle, I did a full Jerry Rados Damascus handle, and I milled windows in it and pockets behind those windows and inlaid pearl back in behind it. And the front window in the knife was a floating inlay, and also the button for the double action auto. So in essence, it was a window release.
Wow. Okay.
So you couldn't tell it was a switchblade.
Right.
It had a thumb stud in it. It was double action, but it had a window release button. And that was the beginning of a new evolution in the Nate Clark knives. So it was also 2005 was the year that I designed a knife I called the Cutter, which was an AutoCAD design. I didn't start the drawing on paper or anything. I started it in AutoCAD. And it was basically my first attempt at making a production style knife. The idea behind it was a stainless steel blade, full titanium handle, and I had a water jet cut tab in the middle of the handle that's about the size of your thumb. And the idea behind that was get the parts water jet cut and mill out that tab and relieve it enough to where it was like a diving board. And that was your button to push down on the sear to release the spring and kick the blade out. So it was supposed to be a big hit. I had 25 of them cut, and I think I sold about 20 of them. Probably still have some parts kicking around. Wasn't quite as popular on the market as I had hoped. But it was a cool knife, and it was a great attempt, and it was me doing my effort of doing the AutoCAD production run knife, something that I had hoped that, you know, my apprentice could do 100% of the work or 95% of the work, and I could, you know, profit from somebody else's labor and so on and so forth. That was also the year that I did a bit of traveling, went back east and visited my mom and my brother. They lived on the East Coast. And one of those trips on the way home, I flew in through Atlanta, Georgia, and attended the Atlanta Blade Show. Didn't have a table, just kind of flew in, enjoyed the show. The Valentins were there, so there's some people that I, you know, knew. Met some people I'd done business with, but never, you know, I'd met in person, and kind of, you know, getting a taste for it, getting a feel for it, and definitely want to go back one day when I'm fully prepared and get a table and do some business there.
So was that your first Blade show?
That was my first and only Blade show in 2005. Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, I wasn't a big traveler. I don't really enjoy traveling outside of my little circle of world over here in the Eugene, Oregon, Douglas, Lane County area.
I figured you would go to Blade Show. Most guys seem to like always make it a big deal or whatever. Well, we got Blade Show West now.
I would.
So that's cool.
Yeah, which I have yet to attend. You know, I think when Blade Show West started becoming a thing, I was kind of falling out of the knife thing a bit. Or maybe I just wasn't really focused on it. But 2005, we're kind of coming to a time in the knife world, at least for me, where I was thinking about some other things in life, looking for some experience in construction, remodeling homes. I had bought and sold my first home, made a cool $20,000 profit, but I also learned that I didn't know nearly enough to really be doing that really yet.
Sometimes you just kind of fall into things like that, you know?
Yeah. Well, in September of 2005, I started picking up some part-time work for a construction company. You know, make money and get paid to learn. I'm always about getting paid to learn. I had, you know, 20 grand sitting in the bank. I was thinking about reinvesting it in a house, but, you know, life just kind of changed that for me. I ended up kind of supplementing my income for a couple of years with that money and starting to focus on a few other things. I was still making knives. I was working a little bit in construction, partying a lot. But I was kind of in sort of a transitional, what do? I want to keep making knives as a primary income for the rest of my life? Do I want to do that as you know, something that's a little bit one of my sources of income? And, you know, thinking about this whole house flipping kind of business plan.
Because at this point you've been doing knives for more than a decade, right? Like straight, like knife making.
Just about, yeah, pretty much, because it was 95 when I was really starting to learn how to make knives, and I've been doing this for 10 years. And, you know, so it's, you know, it's definitely 10 years doing the same thing. And sometimes you're like, you know, I want to keep doing this for another 10 years. Even though I love doing it, and I never imagined I would take 5 years off from it. But, you know, after 10 years, you start to think, you know, maybe there's something else. And I figured knife making is cool, and I definitely want to keep doing it. But I'm never going to make $1 million a year doing this. So, what else is there going on out there that might, instead of making thousands of dollars a month, I can make tens of thousands of dollars in a month or whatever, and the real estate market was calling to me. So I felt like I needed more experience. So I was taking the time to step out, get a job, learn about houses. And I was working for a company that was remodeling old houses from the foundation to the roof. And I ended up, I worked part-time for them off and on, worked knives part-time, full-time, off and on for the next few years, but ended up working into a full-time position. But at the same time, I was meeting new dealers. In 2005, started doing business with a fellow named Keith Newman. Met a guy named Jeff Kerwin, another fellow named Bob Glassman. And, I was still consigning knives with Arizona Custom Knives, doing more and more of the high-end builds using the Damascus, bluing, starting to experiment with, buying Damascus from, off-brand Damascus makers, learning how to squeeze more profit out of my business by spending less money on materials, being more efficient in building the knives. And so, 2005 was definitely a kind of a interesting year for me, where I was playing with different ideas and trying out different things, and exploring new avenues. But I made 53 knives that year, and only worked 864 hours to do it. Mind you, my apprentice was doing a lot of the work too, so he probably worked 800 to 1,000 hours that year. So honestly, there's full-time work, a full year's worth of work going on in my knife shop. I was just doing half of it. But actually, it was financially almost my best year. I made $48,000 between the sale of the house and the knife thing and working construction. And I was super busy, but did really well. So 2006, again, part-time construction, part-time knife making, kind of living off my proceeds a little bit from the sale of that house, and having fun with life. I started dabbling in customizing pistols. I was doing buying old guns or beat up guns, and I'd pull the slide out and the trigger off and the handles off, and I'd file work it and re-gun blue it or polish it out and do a mixture of gun blue polish and just kind of playing around with that, in addition to building knives. But I only built 26 knives in 2006, worked about 800 hours and made $15,000 on knives, $8,000 working construction. So kind of really had a mix of stuff that I was doing, but not super focused on any one thing in particular. But at that point, I was really starting to get into the meat of the construction side of things. And in 2007, I slowly transitioned into full-time work for this construction company called REC Construction. It was owned by a guy out of Cottage Grove named Rick Brammer. And he was, he's about my age at the time. We had 3 other guys working on the crew, and we probably remodeled 8 to 10 houses a year. And I mean, everything from leveling foundations to gutting houses and having, we would gut the houses, and the electricians and plumbers would come in and do their thing, and then we'd remodel it back up and replacing floors and fixtures and, redoing windows and roofs and decks and everything. So I was learning every aspect of the home remodeling. business. And I loved it. I mean, there's nothing like getting to demo a house out. It is fun. Get some big sledgehammers, start kicking holes in the walls. Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's like, where's the dry rot at? We're going to find it.
Last time I did a demo, well, before we started knocking shit down, we got a bunch of hockey pucks, and we just started taking nice shots at the wall.
Yeah, exactly. So
funny how destruction's the
so
funnest.
I was yeah, it absolutely is. And then the hard work starts. But so in 2007, I pretty much transitioned to where I was working 35, 40 hours a week in construction, but I was dedicated to my knife business. I've often referred to Nate Clark Knives as my firstborn child. So even though I was working full time, I was still spending 2 nights a week and 2 days on most weekends in the knife shop, putting in 20 or 30 hours a week on top of a full-time job. But for me, making knives wasn't work. It was just what I like to do. At this point, my apprentice, Darren Russell, was full speed. He knew what he was doing. Pushed me to new levels, and was a huge asset to the business. And so my goal was to spend 20, 30 hours a week in the shop, which wasn't really work for me because I loved doing what I was doing. I loved making knives. And so my goal was to, with my time in the shop, even though limited, was to keep him busy while I wasn't there. And so pretty much we were, able to continue our production of, 5 to 10 knives a month, depending on the level of knives that we were building. But at the same time in 2007, and probably part of what led me to choose the full-time job of construction was I was starting to feel sort of like a decline in sales. And well established at the time, social media was definitely a well-used tool. And I was well known at this point, in my opinion. But what really set the tone for me was the Oregon Knife Collecting Association Eugene Knife Show in April. Was not a good show for the first time.
The Eugene show.
Yeah. I don't
a decline in people showing up, or do you mean
it
overall,
was
like it was people were spending less?
There was less people coming in from out of state for sure. And part of that might have to do with the internet being more prolific and people not having to jump on an airplane to come out and buy those knives. Knife makers not having to spend $500 on a table to sell those knives. And part of it might have been the economy. I don't know, how much you guys were aware in 2008.
A great deal.
But there was an economic recession.
Yeah.
And
as
a investment grade knife maker, guess what?
It's like the first thing to go.
First thing to go. Yes. Nobody's got.
The thing that you don't need is the fancy blue knife with pearls.
Yes, I mean, I would have been really successful if I was selling toilet paper in 2008, but not selling knives.
Yeah. One of those
So
things.
It was toilet paper selling out like COVID time as well.
Oh no, it wasn't selling out like COVID times. Oh my gosh, no. But yeah.
Well, no, Nick is so young, he doesn't even realize.
You're 2 years older than me, guy.
I remember
wasn't
though.
Food shopping in 2008. I was fucking 12.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, I felt that economic recession. I think I remember, like, in a matter of months going from making $2,500 a month to making $1,200 a month off my knives. And thinking, wow, I'm really glad that I'm doing this other thing, because I can weather this.
Have that backup, right?
Yeah, multiple streams of income.
Yeah, for sure.
And so, pretty much, even in the construction side of things, though, I was laid off in December in 2007 from that job. Got my first unemployment check ever in my life. And still going into 2008, I was laid off at the year's beginning. I tried ramping up the knife thing while I was laid off. I had my eyes on the April show in 2008 in Eugene. But again, it was a flop. I think I showed up with 12 knives and sold one. And at that time, my brother, who lived in Springfield, Massachusetts, and was had his own business as a residential and commercial painter, he'd been trying to talk me into coming over there and going to work for him for years. And so here I am, spending half of my time laid off from my construction job, having a hard time selling knives. It's 2008. I decided to take my brother up on that offer and moved back east. And so I made some calls the day after the knife show, and I sold as many knives as I could over the phone, sent the rest to Arizona Custom Knives, put it on consignment, figured money in the bank. That's a savings account right there. And borrowed a little bit of money from my mom and packed things up and moved back east and went to work for my brother. I spent the next 6 months working back there with my brother, and he's got a company called Masterpiece Finishes, and he, much like myself, aspires to do high-end custom stuff, and I enjoyed his level of work and attention to detail and getting a very focused education on the painting part of home improvement.
So that's all finished work then, right?
Oh yeah. Painting commercially back east is a lot different than painting commercially and residentially over here on the West Coast. Primarily because there's a lot of 2- and 3-story homes. So I was used to going 12 feet up a ladder. And then I go to work for my brother, and he's like, go pull that 40-foot ladder off the truck and climb up there and go, sand off that gable and paint it. I'm like, dude, what?
What are you talking about?
Yeah, don't you want to rent a lift? He's like, nah, I don't rent lifts. That costs too much money. Cuts into the profit. So it was quite the experience. But needless to say, I kind of conquered my fear of heights over there.
Sure. How long were you in Springfield for?
I lived in Three Rivers for 6 months. Yeah. Actually, what is the name of that titanium outlet? I lived like 3 blocks down the road from a place I've been buying titanium from for years. It was pretty cool.
They actually they recently just changed their name to Three Rivers Manufacturing.
Did they?
Oh,
yeah. Nice.
Oh, that's where they are. I didn't know that. Interesting.
Three Rivers Manufacturing is like a 5-minute drive from like one of my favorite swimming spots. It's
So if the river met the valley, then a PVK.
That swimming spot must be the intersection in Three Rivers during a thunderstorm.
That's exactly right. Yep. Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, I lived practically within stone's throw of that intersection, and man, the first thunderstorm, I was like, oh my God, I should have built Noah's Ark.
This is gonna flood. Yeah, Halpern titanium. Yep.
Halpern titanium. Yes, that's it. That's it exactly. Yeah. I mean, and it was kind of an interesting experience to be right there, and I was like, oh, I gotta go buy me some titanium in person today.
Just for the heck of it. Yeah, right.
Just for the heck of it. I wasn't building knives over there. I had left my entire knife shop back here in Oregon. I was hoping my apprentice was gonna do some stuff and give me a royalty check, but that didn't work out quite as well as I hoped. He built a few knives, but I think he ended up working for a painting company that summer over here locally. So,
That's how it goes.
but anyways, it was, I was there for 6 months, almost to the day. Worked the traditional painting season over there, which is much shorter than it is over here.
Yep.
And decided that I'm not an East Coaster. Everything was backwards and upside down. I'm like, I think I'm pointing north because the ocean's on my left side. Oh, no, I'm looking south. And I never could get it right.
It's a whole different thing. It's all right.
Yeah, it is. My kids were here in Oregon, and I didn't get to see them at all that summer, and it was like, yeah, I got to go back home. This isn't working out. So, but I was there until, I want to say, I think it was mid-October. And then I came back to Oregon and, just kind of started over again. Worked a variety of construction jobs, started building knives again in early 2009. Thought about going to college. I even started doing an online college, looking for a degree. I was thinking that I wanted to be an administrator in healthcare, nursing home kind of thing, because I'd done my market research and that was the most growing, highest paid for, but I ended up getting a job in the maintenance department at a nursing home in Springfield, Oregon, a couple months into college, and I dropped out because I'm like, yeah, I'm just going to work my way up the ladder. I'm not going to incur a big college debt when I'm reading the writing on the wall here, and my boss is going to retire before long. And I was right. He did. And so I started this job at Marquee Nursing and Rehab in Springfield, Oregon as a facilities maintenance assistant, and continued to work, kind of got right back into the roll of things with the knives, working 2 nights a week, and on the weekends, my apprentice was still there. Painting season was over. He was ready to make knives. We got right back into it. I started making connections with some new knife purveyors. AJ Di Bartolomeo, I could never say his name right. And he kind of became a primary benefactor in 2009, 2010. I think I was building 5 knives a month for him alone. Working about probably 20 hours a week, producing 1 to 2 knives a week on top of my day job. Starting to have a little bit of fun with things. My apprentice Darren and I got our hands on some video recording equipment, and we started recording our knife making, like pick a knife and record it start to finish, and chopping up our own videos and trying to get them online. I was trying to up my customer service, and I would do in the making bench shots, like every couple of days I'd take pictures of the knife that I'd be working on for a customer, and I'd send them to them so they could, see the progression of the knife, and made it my policy to do proof of completion pictures. So I'd finish a knife, and I'd take, I started doing basically my own photography, finished photography. Bought a photographic light box and got some good lights and picked up a good camera, and was just, kind of trying to streamline even another aspect of the knife making process, instead of outsourcing those photographs of just the nice knives. I was trying to get photographic evidence of every knife, and just do it myself. Of course, I don't know, I had some with the whole video thing, we were like putting Pantera and Megadeth in there behind it, and then people weren't publishing it because I wasn't properly giving doing the whole, I can't think of the words right now, but
sure, ASCAP and BMI want their cut, man.
yeah, absolutely. And I'm like, kind of like, oh, what's going on here? They won't publish my videos, and so, but pretty much like that was, I started doing that, working at Marquee and continuing knives. 2010 flew by. I was having a good time. I'm making knives, making good money again. Obviously not keeping good records because I don't know how much I was making, but it was, my primary job. I was doing good at, and the knife thing was, get a knife check. It's a bonus. So, but I kind of started to move away from dealers at this point because I wanted a little bit more. I wanted to take control of what I was building and how I was building it. Darren was inspiring me. He's kind of a design function nut, a lot like Butch is. And he was pushing me and inspiring me to branch out into more scale releases, bolster releases, window knives. I'm not so much of a function guy. I like fit and finish, design and color. That's what I like. I like the art aspect of it. He likes the trick aspect of it. So together we're a pretty good team. And he actually really ended up kind of taking over the whole function side of the knife. He started doing a lot of the mill outs and the fitting and the design, and which just kind of left me free to do, the finish work and putting the materials together. Like, we're going to use this Damascus and this Hannah material and this, anodize these cut liners, and I'm going to do this kind of file work here. And I started teaching myself how to set stones and, just upping the ante, in addition to, really moving into a new level on the function side of thing with Darren's help. We went away from the traditional button ramps underneath to give a return spring or return to the button, and started doing coil spring returns, which enabled us to pack our function into a much smaller little package in the knife. So I was able to place my button almost anywhere I wanted, which farther up towards the front of the knife, up in the bolster, is always better, because when you grab a knife, that's where your thumb naturally lands. And, so we're just kind of fine tuning and, in my opinion, kind of finding a higher level of quality and usability and art all at the same time, which was really what I wanted. I didn't enjoy taking a custom order and building something to somebody else's specs and thoughts and ideas as much as I did doing it myself. And because I already had a full-time job and had a regular paycheck, I wasn't dependent on making a sale. So I had the freedom of design and time, and I could build a knife. It took as long as it took, and I could do whatever I wanted. And when it was done, I could take pictures and try to sell it. And if I couldn't sell it through my venues, I consigned it to Arizona Custom Knives.
There you go.
And
that works.
And that's where it sat until it sold. And I thought, if it sits there for 3 months, oh well, it's fine. In 3 months, I'll get paid. Well, I found quickly that we were building a caliber of knives. The high-end investment grade art knives, they didn't take 3 months to sell. This 2011 was a year that we really started to move in that direction. I was looking for good quality but cheaper materials to build a knife out of so that I could increase our profit margin without having to increase our prices. So it kept our knives competitive. So I was selling these high-end art knives for under $1,000 still, but making 90% profit. Instead of what I used to sell for $1,000, I'd be making 60% profit back in the day. So I was spending so much on materials. So we were just finding different ways, different designs, different things to do, streamlining our processes, getting them down quicker, faster, not repeating, like when I first started building a knife, I would put it together and take it apart 50 times during the build of a knife. Towards the end here, in the last few years that we were really, building knives before I decided to take a break, I'd say 5 to 10 times I'd take the knife apart, depending on the knife.
Getting that efficiency down.
Getting the efficiency down, cutting down the steps, cutting down walking back and forth between the equipment and everything else. I mean, I used to build a knife and Darren be like, "What are you doing? You're like wasting your time." And every single thing we did, I'd write it down. I'd have 3 or 4 pages of steps that we took to build a knife. And then I'd go through it and I'd be like, "Oh, we took it apart here 3 times to do this, this, and this. And we could have just done all 3 of those things the first time we took it apart. And that would have saved us 25 minutes. And then the next time I build a knife, I'd go off I'd rewrite that down and follow that process, and then I'd reassess it. And we went from it used to take me 35, 40 hours to build one knife. And towards the end, I could build that same knife. We would build 2 knives in 25 hours.
There you go.
Business management.
Absolutely. And I didn't have to raise my prices, but I increased my profit.
Most people would. They'd be like, I did this thing, so let me raise my price.
Yeah.
For no reason.
I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to price myself out of sales, and I didn't want to price my knives out of my customers being able to attain one.
Right.
So I found a different way to do it. And, when I come back, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to increase my prices just because supply and demand, 5 years off, supply and demand.
Tooling costs.
Yeah, that's right. Tooling costs, shipping costs. Yeah.
It's gone up quite a bit. If you've been at it for 5 years, just in the last year and a half, everything's gone up quite a bit.
Well, I mean, yeah, I've watched inflation, and I can't honestly jump back into the business and be doing what I was doing for the exact same price. I mean, I just really can't. So,
the re-entry into the market with some prices increase is totally reasonable. That's fine.
Yeah. And it really, there was, I had done in those later years, done so much business with dealers that were pushing me to make 5-10 knives a month that were all very similar. I actually felt like I kind of flooded the market with all of these pretty similar knives that I was actually fighting when it came for me to like put a knife in consignment. It's like I was fighting my own supply of knives that were already out there on other dealers' sites and on the tables at the shows, and felt like that was a factor. So taking a break for me was, good for my health, but also a bonus because it gives time for those knives to kind of dissipate into the private collections where nobody's ever going to see them again. And then it's going to increase the demand on the market. And believe me, I felt it because I've had people reaching out to me through emails or calling me up out of the blue and going, "Hey, can I get a knife?" And I'd be like, "Oh, I'm not really building right now." And they're like, "All right, well, put me on that list when you start again. I want a knife." And it's like, yeah, you're on the list, buddy. But, I really don't have a list. Call me. If you're listening, call me here in 4 months.
I'll call you in 4 months.
Yeah. So, that kind of leads me to the years of 2012, 2013, 2014. I call them the years of the one-of-a-kind knives. I was aspiring to try to, every once in a while, just knuckle down and build a knife that I pulled all the stops out on. for example, in 2013, I built a knife that I called Cosmic Mist. So this knife, I spent 80 hours, and granted, bear in mind that in 80 hours, I probably could have built 5 knives, all high end. And so I put all that time into one knife, made it worthy of actually naming it. And it was a theme. The theme behind this knife was I wanted this knife to look like something. I wanted to look like when you looked at this knife and you thought of the name, you're like, okay, I get it. I actually didn't name the knife until after it was complete, but basically I did a bunch of circular window holes with black lip and gold lip and white mother of pearl inlays behind them, and a full Damascus handle, all gun blued. And when you look at the knife, it gives you the impression of looking at a outer space scenery with planets, and I inlaid stones in it, planets and stars and suns, and so the name Cosmic Mist came to mind, and I named that knife. And it was one that I wanted to immortalize it on the internet. So putting it on consignment with Arizona Custom Knives, who takes a picture of every knife they sell or consign and leaves it up there forever. So I consigned it with them, and I thought, I'm going to put a $2,999 price tag on this knife, and I don't care if it takes 6 months to sell. 18 hours later, Arizona Custom Knives calls me up and says, your knife sold.
Bam. Look at that, huh?
Yep. It's definitely a
Killing
good
it.
feeling.
I'm like, okay, I think I found the niche that I want to be in. I think I'm finally there. In 2014, I made another knife that I consigned on Arizona Custom Knives. It was my 10-inch Bach design, and I called it Sword in the Stones. And again, inlaid with a bunch of stones, and had a sword-like design in the middle of it that was backlayed with mother of pearl, and looked like a sword. So theme knives, I like them, and that's what I aspire to do more and more of when I get back into it. However, in 2014, I was thinking about getting back into it, but as I had read the writing on the wall with my job at Marquis, the nursing home, my boss retired, and I was promoted to the maintenance director. And this is when I was burning the candle at both ends. I was not being healthy. I wasn't eating regular. I wasn't eating the right stuff. I was drinking a lot of expensive dark beers because I love them, and I could. And, my lifestyle put me in the hospital. I had basically I was diagnosed with diverticulitis, and my colon swelled up and almost exploded inside of me. And I had to make some major changes. I had to cut something out of my life and slow down. And, of course, I had this new position, and I had a nursing home full of people that needed me to do that job. And I felt like I was, the one to do it. And I had to say, I got to put a pause on the knife making thing for a while. And so that's what I did. And, it's been 6 years, going on close to 7, I think. And I thought it was going to be a 2-year break, get my health under control. I was approaching 300 pounds at the time. I'm weighing 220 now. I'm healthy. And I did what I needed to do health wise. It's just been a matter of focusing back in. But like I mentioned early on, I've got the shell of my shop. I've got all my tools here. I've got this design, and I'm, possibly 3 months away from having a functional running knife shop again. And that's my dream, and I hope that that's my Christmas present to myself and all of my knife making enthusiasts out there as well. So
seems like a great goal.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like the knife making thing and everything that I've done over the years, and actually sitting down and putting together this little outline and timeline of my knife making career is is really bringing it all back and really fanning the flames of that desire to get back into it. It seems like a dream, but it's a dream that I really want to get back to very soon. So having said that, all I've got left to say is, who's got questions?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Re-entering the market in this particular time is probably, I'm gonna say, the best time. And anyone listening
you would think
would
know
think
that,
exactly
yeah.
why I would be saying that. But I mean, this is the
the
best
outside
time.
wouldn't think that.
Right. This is the best time to do it because, so one of the reasons that we do this podcast, and one of the reasons that I focus so much on guys who make or have made automatics, is because the same amount of guys who have made or do make automatics now are the same people and number that were doing it 5 or 10 years ago. There's just not that many people doing it. So I mean,
I would agree.
Which
Not that much interest.
Yeah, well, the thing
Hopefully
is,
we can turn around with this.
No, I mean, there's lots of interest. There's an incredible amount of interest, but there's nobody building.
What are you trying to say?
Yeah,
No one's putting the idea on the steel.
Well, no, yeah, exactly. So what I'm trying to say is that there's an incredible amount of interest from collectors and nobody building. There's nobody new entering the market who is building. So
there's a
now
bunch of
is
people.
The best time.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
A lot of folks consuming the image and not producing one.
Right, exactly. So there's no new apprentices. There are no new automatic knife makers. Not really. I mean, there are people I know who are making automatics. That does not make them new people in the industry. That means that they are people who already existed, who decided to saw something interesting and they're going to try to make an automatic. So, I mean, you're kind of joking about the 4-month thing, but I mean, like, I'll give you an order, right now for knives if that's what it is of interest, but I don't think it is at this moment. So, I mean, I definitely welcome you to get back into it as soon as possible because
I got to knock the rust off the tools. I got to knock the rust off of my skills. I'm going to tell you right now, I gotta exercise these hands because, oh my God, my hands and my arms. I used to be able to grab somebody's hand in a handshake and make them feel like their knuckles were breaking, and now it's reverse.
I mean,
I got the wimpy handshake.
It's muscle memory. At some point,
it'll
build itself back.
It's like riding a bike; it'll come back. But what I'd like to do is one, feed my own imagination, and I'm gonna start with some simple stuff. I have a 11-year-old son, and I really would like to bring him out into the shop and say, hey, let's build a knife together, and start with some sheath knives, start with some folders. Work my way back up on the good stuff. But I tell you, I've got 12 bars of Damascus sitting out there. I'm pretty sure I got a bunch of nice handle materials sitting out there. I don't even know where it's at, but I'll find it in the process of putting the shop back together. I've got everything ready to go. I just need to get it set up, and I need to get that hone those skills back in a little bit. And you're gonna hear from me. Or I'm going to hear from you because you're going to be like, oh, there's some new stuff on Arizona Custom Knives. What the heck? Why didn't he call me? So.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, it's I don't know. These are wild times we're living in, but I mean, it's always, when we go through people's registry of their career and these timelines, I mean, it's really wild to hear the different paths that you take, because it's like knife making is always there. It's just there's always a couple other things that are happening, and that always ends up being important because, like you said, whether or not it was at the forefront, I mean, like the finished painting, the carpentry work, it's all a manifestation of the creation of something and the appreciation for doing like finite tasks really well.
Yeah. Yep. Starting with a hunk of material or a pile of materials and finishing with a creation that you had pictured in your mind is very similar to the satisfaction that I would get from beginning with a 1960s built home that was half rotted and tilted to the side and had holes in the roof, and ending up, working with the crew that I was working with, having a finished product of this home that was rentable and livable. There's the start and the finish and what you've done with your own hands and the pride that comes from that. But for me, nothing has been more satisfying than the knife building. That is there's a lot of people out there that can remodel a house, and there's a much smaller group of folks that can take some raw materials and envision a finished product and create a custom art double action switchblade that is, mind-blowing and coveted by many.
Oh yeah, there's less than 6 of them currently. Like that's, there's not a whole lot of them at all.
We got to come up with like a nickname for them. I think they have
soon to be 7
then.
then.
Soon to be 7, sure, absolutely.
Yeah. What's
No,
the
I mean,
nickname they
that's
got
really,
going for them?
like outside, which is funny because like I've talked to people, as I'm sure we all have talked to people outside of the knife industry, and you describe to them these things that exist, these knives with springs in them, and you're like, yeah, it's like nobody does it anymore, and they're like, yeah, no, like I totally dig that, and you're like, no, really, nobody does it anymore. And they're like, no, yeah, I get that, and I'm like, okay, forget it, like no, nobody does this anymore. It's just one of those Jedi trades that really just hasn't, the information hasn't been passed down. Like you said, the Valtons were happy to pass it to you, and you're happy to pass it to someone else. It's this weird.
It's a pretty small circle, though. Yes,
it's very small. Like it's extremely small.
And the interesting thing, like I found in the later years when I was building regularly, I realized that I could build a folder and sell it for pretty much as I could build a switchblade. With less work. Another way that I made more profit. But I was like, yeah, I want to do that. But like what I did, like, for example, with the Sword in the Stones. The Sword in the Stones was a 10-inch dagger that was double action. And I learned that I could build, 2 or 3 knives at the same time. I'm doing the same process to each knife in tandem. Therefore, I'm being more productive. I built Sword in the Stones, a high-end, one-of-a-kind, custom double-action switchblade, and at the same time, I built 2 folders in my other dagger design that were about 9 inches long, and sold all 3 at the same time. I got, I think, retail $1,900 out of Sword in the Stones off the Arizona Custom Knives, and $1,200 a piece for the 2 folders. So I'm still like, I can't stop building the switchblades because that's what I originally fell in love with way back in 1994 when I first saw Rainey's Fantail D&D and pushed that button and had that knife jump out of my hands. Like, I mean, I got a rush of adrenaline off of that, and I'll never forget it. And the first time when I hand over a knife to a guy who's never fired a custom automatic switchblade and they fire that thing, like I can still see it in their eyes and on their face, that feeling that I had way back then.
It's something special. It's that symphony of flicks and sounds and motion.
Yep. It's got something to do with actuating a trigger of some kind and a spring, then kicking something into place and then driving something. Yeah, it's like a mechanical. I don't know. You don't get that with any other knife.
It's something that is.
Yep. You hit a button, action happens.
Yep, absolutely.
It makes a lot of noise.
It's like when someone like thought about the mechanics way more, than like just the knife part.
Yes. Yeah.
They decided to like, I want to think about the mechanics. Which is then like, how am I going to overcomplicate it and just to get this blade out?
Yep.
Well, whoever thought of that was pretty cool.
You gotta add the next step to it. That's all. Yep. Very cool. No, I think it's yeah. I mean, I would usually say something like it's tough to fit all the specifics into one episode, but you took notes and fit it all very concisely into one episode. So I would say that was a very very concise timeline.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, it's
appreciate that.
Definitely.
I do like to be prepared.
That's good. That's absolutely you're there. I don't know. I think I'm good. Is there something we didn't go over that you would like to go over?
At this time, I think telling my story and sharing the progression and sharing my my desire to be back to it and to be creating art again was my primary desire of what I wanted to do here. And as a looking at something from the other side, as a admirer, collector, purveyor of custom knives, custom automatic knives, I am really hoping that that those people out there are finding a closer and better connection, and understanding of what goes into a knife and why and how those things are made in that on that level. And that's what I wanted to do was create a connection with those people out there who look at my work and admire it. And so in the future, when they call me up on the phone or reach out to me through email or text or whatever, they know who they're talking to, and the passion behind it and the reason behind what I'm doing, and why I took a break and why I want to come back, and how I got here, and the appreciation that I have for the Valentins who gave me this opportunity to be able to share my internal creative juices with the world out there. And I appreciate you guys for giving me the platform and the venue to express that and to have that message and my story out there and available. Again, this is this is one of those things that's you guys are gonna put this out on the web, and it's gonna be out there immortalized forever. And I'm looking forward to seeing and hearing the feedback.
Heck yeah, man! This is it. You're absolutely right. We've put this up, and you've inscribed your name and some dates in the stone, and now you've got we're gonna check back with you in 6 months and see what's clever. Because that's kind of the plan, is to keep up with guys and get the history and have the podcast record some of that history, and definitely to keep tabs and see where people sort of progress to. It's about the past timeline, but it's also about the future timeline, seeing what happens afterwards.
Well, I for one am going to be doing my part in keeping the auto custom knife industry alive and kicking.
Nice. And
everyone out there, you're going to be seeing some more amazing work from me in the future.
Killer, man. I know for one, I can't wait. I'm looking forward to it. It's gonna be pretty badass.
I'll definitely be checking in, seeing hopefully those 4 months turn into 2, and see what we crank out of that shop.
There you go. Very awesome. All right, well, On that note, I want to thank everybody out there in listener land for tuning in to another episode of the Bladeology podcast. We've done it. It's episode 41 with Nate Clark. I want to thank you so much. This is the vocal representation of Jeremiah Burbank from PVK Vegas, and I'm signing off.
It's Nick Chuprin of NCC Knives. I'm signing off.
Elijah Isham of Isham Blade Works. Good night.
Nate Clark Knives from Drain, Oregon.